It's FIDE Master John Curtis. Welcome to my chess channel. As you know, I'm from Australia, on the east coast of Australia, and today I want to present to you a really great game. It's between Carlsen and Nakamura. Carlsen and Nakamura. It's from played about 8 days ago, and we're playing the orangutan. As you can see on the opening of my YouTube video, there's a picture of myself and all the orangutans and the monkeys playing chess and all the characters and everything. But I might just go back before we play a bit of the history of the opening, the orangutan. The orangutan, or also known as the Polish opening, was named after a Polish fella. His name was Alexai Pavlovich Sokolsky. If I remember correctly, Sokolsky was a theoretician, a great theoretician. He might have even written a few books on chess problems. I'm not too sure about that one. You'll have to look it up. Sokolsky, S-O-K-O-L-S-K-Y. But going back further into the origin of the name orangutan, comes under the unorthodox or unusual openings category. It's not played very often. However, it was played, funnily enough, by Boris Spassky against Smyslov, against the great Smyslov in one of their matches that they played. Yeah, so Boris Spassky did play it against Smyslov once. So if you go into chessgames.com, you could probably look up the game, the orangutan, and see how it compared against this game I'm going to present to you today between Magnus Carlsen and Hikaru Nakamura. A few days earlier, Carlsen had played the orangutan against Wesley, so I think it was in the Crypto Cup, and Magnus Carlsen lost that game. So he's very brave, the old Magnus Carlsen. Out he comes again with the orangutan, or also known as the monkey's bum attack. Anyway, in chess circles in New South Wales, Australia, anyway. And because it's sort of a backward game, so they call it the monkey's bum. Anyway, or the orangutan, just for fun, you know, they just have a little fun name for it. And it's not played very often. I think it's it's rated the 9th most popular opening move, that is B4, out of all the first moves on the chessboard. There's 8 pawns, and it's rated the 9th best move. So, or the 9th most favoured move, B4, the Polish. Now, how did it get the name orangutan? Well, I'm going to tell you. It goes right back to 1924 in New York, in the Bronx. Now, so happens that New York 1924 tournament, I think it was one of the greatest tournaments ever played. And Tartakower was visiting the Bronx Zoo before his game, right? He had to play a game there. Tartakower was playing, who was he playing now? I have a little note of it there. Tartakower playing Geza Maroczy, that's right. Now, you know Geza Maroczy, he's the one who they named the Maroczy Bind chess opening after. So Geza Maroczy, very strong grandmaster. And, of course, Tartakower was well known in those days as one of the strongest players in the world. It's the New York 1924 tournament. So off Tartakower goes to the Bronx Zoo. Anyway, he sees a monkey, and or not monkey, an orangutan, and the orangutan's name is Susan. Well, what does Susan do when she sees Tartakower? Well, she gave him the finger. That's what she did. And he said, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to play B4. It looks like you're giving the finger to your opponent when you play B4 on the chessboard. And that's the very first move that's played here. As you can see on the board there, B4. It looks like Tartakower's giving Geza Maroczy the finger. Anyway, but this particular game, the Geza Maroczy Tartakower game ended in a draw, funnily enough, as does this game. But though it's a draw, it's exciting because it's between Magnus Carlsen, who lost with the orangutan, against Wesley So just a few days earlier. So here he is. He's playing Nakamura, and yet he does the same thing. So my observation is Carlsen's obviously not too worried about it. I think perhaps he might be playing these types of openings because he has to play Jan Nepomniachtchi in the future, in the World Championship later on. So he probably doesn't want to give too much away, and he's working on his preparations for a real powerful match. So I'd be very, very wary if I was Jan when you see Carlsen playing openings which are unusual and considered weak, to tell you the truth. Okay, they're considered weak, and that's why it's the ninth most popular move and not played by grandmasters generally, because it's very hard to get a long-lasting advantage out of it, and your options of winning are minimal in the Super Grandmaster category. Anyway, without further ado, I'll get into the game for you between Magnus Carlsen and Hikaru Nakamura. So Nakamura replies with e5, and we see bishop takes b4 was played, bishop takes e5, and this is theory. Nothing's changed in, I think, 100 years. Knight f6, all book moves. c3 is played, and you'll see the point of c3 later on. It's weak to move your bishop back, and it costs time. White can see that black's going to play knight to c6, and he doesn't want to waste time moving his bishop back and admitting that his whole opening idea is faulty, to say the least. He wants black to move his bishop back, and he wants to start getting a pawn mass in the centre, or get some play in the centre as compensation. Anyway, we'll see what happens. Bishop e7 is played, and one would consider that in this position, my assessment is black is better. And when we do have a look at the what the engine says on the side of the board, you'll have a look at the bar, and the black side is slightly over the halfway mark, indicating yes, indeed, the engine believes black is just slightly better. Now e3 is played, and now black is even better again. c5, and black retains the initiative, so it must be the best move. Bishop takes knight, bishop takes bishop, and now black is better, right? g3 is played. Now you might say, well, what's Carlsen doing? All he's doing is making pawn moves. However, I'll tell you what he's up to. When you've got your pawns on black squares, I always tell my grasshoppers, move your bishop on white squares. So with his bishop, it allows his bishop to be able to wander freely around between the pawns. It's very, very good structure for an endgame. Okay, so that's what Carlsen's looking for. He's playing the opening, but he's got a long-term plan to get to an endgame. Anyway, b6 is played. He wants to challenge. Nakamura wants to challenge on those white squares. He knows if he can challenge on the white squares and get any sort of edge on the white squares, well, then he is better. Another thing, too, is to look at this type of position, and we know from our general chess theory that in open games, the two bishops are better. In closed games, the two bishops are not as effective. But in this position, as we can see, the game is sort of open, a bit more open than closed. Things may change. We'll have a look. Knight c6, the rook was attacked. d4, and the engine's giving this as pretty close to even, still favouring black in a minimalist fashion. Very interesting move, bishop a6. Hikaru develops his bishop. He develops his bishop, and he says, well, like Susan that gave to Tartakower, you played that b4 move and you gave me the finger. So I'm going to try to beat you. So I'm going to try to stop you castling. And Carlsen says, well, I'm not going to have any of that. So he puts his knight here, plays knight to e2 to cut off the diagonal and be able to castle, you see. Castles, and both players have castled. The other thing that, there's two things here in this position. Not only is white put his pawns on the correct squares, makes it a difficult game, but also there's a isolated backward D pawn. Can you see it? This pawn here, it's an isolated backward D pawn. Okay. And so Carlsen may say, well, make a mistake, buddy. You know how good I am at the endgames. Recognised as probably one of the finest endgame players in modern history, our Magnus Carlsen. Let's see now, rook to e8. All right then, so now there is a threat. The threat being bishop takes knight, right? Bishop takes knight, queen takes, and pawn takes pawn wins a pawn. Well, let's see what transpires. Rook to e1, he wants to stop the bishop takes knight idea. Rook to c8, now he wants to bear pressure on the c pawn, right? He knows he might be able to create an open file by capturing the c pawn. I don't think black's worried about the pawn being pushed because he would then get this lovely square for his knight and he might commence operations on the king side. I don't think Carlsen would like that. So Carlsen just sits back and says, well, I don't know what to do. I'll play a3. At least it stops knight here, followed by knight there, attacking the rook, where the rook would have no square. So a plan could be, in that position, pawn takes pawn, knight to b5, knight there, and knight to b2, knight to c4, and the knight would be a real painful pest. And in the hands of a great player like Hikaru Nakamura, a great tactician, it could be deadly. It could be the final blow. So bishop takes knight is played, right, after a3. The Carlsen must have seen all this. He recaptures with the rook, pawn takes pawn, pawn takes pawn, and now, because you've got to recover your material, haven't you? Now, here he comes. This is the whole point of the attack. Knight takes pawn. Okay. Now we can see a couple of pawns have been obtained by the players. Pawn takes rook. Okay. Can you see what's coming? Can you see it? Queen takes rook. That's forced, isn't it? Or you lose a piece. Now comes bishop takes pawn. He's attacking the castle. So what do you do? Well, there's only one move, rook to rook 2. And now comes rook checks, and he gets the piece back. Very clever tactics by our friend Hikaru. Perhaps I think both players would have realised that this whole variation, which was allowed by Carlsen, so he must have seen all of this when he played a3. So he's allowed all this because he's carefully calculated that we have bishops of opposite colours, and he's out for a draw. Yes, Carlsen's out for a draw. Rook takes knight. Now the material is even. Black has 6 pawns, and white has 4. Well, when I say it's even, it's sort of it's a balanced position. Queen to d3. Now that attacks the bishop and the rook. Okay, so what do you do in a position like that? You've got 2 pieces attacked. Well, you play rook to b7, don't you? Rook to b2. And that defends your rook and defends your bishop. Because the bishop holds the rook, and you can't take the bishop because he'll take the rook. So isn't that a clever way of defending your piece? Okay? So rook takes rook is played, bishop takes rook. And again, Magnus Carlsen must have seen right down to this final position where he's a piece down, and he must have seen that he could play rook here. Any other move would lose a piece. So Magnus has seen like 6 moves ahead or whatever when he played a3, or 5 moves in front. So the bishop recovers, and now let's see now. White wants to get his bishop on dominant squares. Remember, he's got 4 pawns, his opponent's got 6. So, but 2 pawns down in bishops of opposite colours endings is nothing, right? It's nothing. And Magnus will show you that. He plays queen d6 and he says, well, right, look what I'm doing. You can't even move anything. And he can't. So he plays g6 with the idea of playing king to g7. He doesn't want any of this nonsense going on his white squares near his king. Now, queen to e8 is played, and queen to d7. They're playing all the best moves. Queen to d2. He's attacking the bishop, and he's also clearing a way for his bishop to go to b5. So he moves the bishop, and now bishop b5. And now you can't really save the d pawn. So the bishop goes to c5. Now in this position, you would not want to take the d pawn with the queen, because if you did, queen checks here would be deadly, because the queen and bishop would then work together on the f pawn, and you would be in big trouble. Your king would be under immense pressure. So the bishop takes, right? So the bishop takes the pawn, and now queen to e4. There's no immediate threats that black's got against the king. So bishop b5, and now the pawns are white's only got 1 pawn now after the moves that have been played. He's only got 1 pawn. He did have 2. I say black. White's only got is only 1 pawn down instead of being 2 pawns down. And we do have those bishops of opposite colours. And as I said to you, you can be 2 pawns down, bishops of opposite colours, and it's really almost impossible to lose. The queen to e2. Magnus doesn't care. He's very, very happy to exchange queens. He says, "Come on, remember I gave you the finger. There's nothing you can do about it, buddy." Anyway, Hikaru is probably laughing. There's actually a video that I saw on YouTube where I went in there and I had a look, and in YouTube, Hikaru was laughing his face off at proposedly laughing his face off at the fact that Hikaru played the orangutan. Hikaru's got a good sense of humour. You've got to give it to him. He can be quite a funny man. Okay, so king g2 is played. Puts his king on white squares rather than black ones, because he knows that eventually he's going to force the exchange of queens or be very dominant himself on the board. So he takes the pawn. He says, well, I'm Magnus Carlsen. I'm a world champion. I know that there's no way you can do anything after pawn takes pawn, and it's just simply a drawn position. Another player might panic and say, well, I don't like to have 2 isolated pawns and the like, but Magnus knows these positions back to front. And now he pushes the pass pawn, and the pawn is captured. Now he knows he can't take it, so he plays queen to f3, right? And he's happy to change queens, again, because he knows the positions are draw if queens are exchanged. And Hikaru says, well, I'm not going to muck around and waste my time and my energy, because I know that the overall positions are drawn and we can play for 200 moves, and Magnus would just sit there like a fortress of solitude, and there'd be just no way to make any progress. Okay? So that's the final position. They just push a few pawns. And notice, just for your endgames tuition players, black puts the pawns on black squares where he can defend them easily with his black bishop. And white will put the pawns on the white squares. And that's just simple logic. A lot of players fail to use that logic, but that's what they do in Grandmaster Chess. They just secure the position. Now there's no pawns that can be captured by the black pieces. And then white just sits there like a pyramid, like just can't be moved. sit there for thousands of years and nothing will move him. He just moves his bishop backwards and forwards, and that's all that happens. They move bishops around, and the position's agreed to be a draw. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed that game, and I hope you've learned a little bit about the origin of the orangutan. Remember, the great Tartakower, he went to the Bronx Zoo in 1924 during the great tournament in New York. He had to play our friend Maroczy, Geza Maroczy, and the orangutan Susan gave him the finger, and that's why he decided that day that he would play the orangutan. Okay, and don't forget to have a look at those other games that may be of interest to you. You can go to chessgames.com, look them up. Those other games between Geza Maroczy and Tartakower from the great 1924 New York tournament. Remember, on chessgames.com, those games go way back to the 1800s. Any of your favourite players, Capablanca, Paul Morphy, and the great Ulf Anderson, any of those players, you can go back and have a look at the games. And remember too, with the orangutan, you may wish to have a look at the Boris Spassky Smyslov match that was played with the orangutan, or Polish Opening as it's known, named after the Polish master Alexai Pavlovich Sokolsky. Remember, Sokolsky. And if you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up on YouTube. And if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe to my channel. It's free to subscribe. But if you'd like to make a donation to help me, sponsor me, help me make these types of videos, well, you can make a small donation to PayPal. It'd be much appreciated. It doesn't matter what amount it is, whether it's $1 or $5. Anything is really appreciated. My friend Robert Fox, he made a donation, bought me a mouse, right? And without that, I would still be using my old mouse here, the one that doesn't squeak anymore. Okay, see you later, and I'll see you again in my next video. Don't forget, I do stream regularly on Twitch TV, and it's also FM John Curtis Chess. Bye for now, and I love you all. Be good.